I became homeless in the beginning of 2022, and when that happened, I thought I had to put all my dreams on hiatus, but I have learned a lot since then. Hey, it's Izzy and what's been busy. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Happy New Year's! I know it's literally the first week of January, and I know everyone's at a point of reflection. I wanted to encourage you all and tell my story when it comes to picking up hobbies, and honestly how you can get an idea of how to do it too. I became homeless at 15, and as we speak, me and my family are currently living in a hotel. I am by no means coming from a place of privilege. To summarize, for those who haven't followed my story, me and my family have been in and out of hotels for years. We have slept on park benches, we have slept in hotel lobbies, gas stations, and that all sounds pretty sad, but that's why I'm kind of making this video. Because my lifestyle is not desirable whatsoever, and whenever I share my hobbies, people are always so curious. Like, how in the world were you able to learn all of these different hobbies? For those who haven't followed my journey, I'll leave the playlist up here so you can check it out, because our lifestyle is very specific, and I am aware that we are not the standard. People have ideas of what homelessness is, and I have noticed that me and my family just don't fit into that. Even when we were living in a shelter, people were like so amazed by how well we behaved and how well we dressed, and people were shocked to see how educated I was. They would always say, wow, you sound so educated. So we don't really fit the mold entirely, but to be fair, think about it. Who is learning all these different hobbies while homeless? Unfortunately, I can't say this is the standard, but I want to create a paradigm shift, because hobbies and homeless is pretty simple. You don't need to wait for this perfect moment in your life to start pursuing the things that you love. I want you all to know by the end of the video that life will always get in the way of your passions if you allow it to. As a follower of Jesus Christ, I believe that God puts desires in all of us, and I had so many different passions and dreams that I want to accomplish. But when we became homeless and I was 15, I assumed that at that age, like, wow, maybe this isn't the time. Maybe I should wait till everything gets sorted out, then I'll pursue my hobbies. We subconsciously do that all the time as humans. We think we have to wait till we get to this certain destination to move on to the next point. And if I'm gonna be fair, there was a lot going on. But later on, Holy Spirit was reminding me of all the accomplishments that I wanted to achieve at a certain age, and all of the challenges that I was planning on facing, and he just put it at the forefront of my mind that, wait, I shouldn't let go of this quite yet. I think it's great to share all these different hobbies, but I don't think it's going to be as impactful if I don't tell you my mindset. To sum up my childhood, I was always raised with a bunch of extracurricular activities. It was pretty common for me and my family to juggle a lot of different things, and my parents were not always financially stable. We did have our ups and downs, but in 2022, everything hit us a lot harder than in other years. The first 6 months of our homeless journey, we spent majority of our time in the car, and that was the first time I've ever experienced anything like that before. Living in a car was very different, of course, than living in a home, especially since there's 6 of us in total, and there's not a lot of room when you are in a car. Now, as we were in the car for 6 months, I understand why I wasn't pursuing anything quite yet, because there was a lot of time to just reflect. In a way, when we were in the car, I was kind of waiting for, like, oh, you know, eventually this will just kind of end. Maybe we'll be in the car for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks turned into 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks turned into 3 months, and 3 months turned into 6 months. But what I learned is that I can't wait till life comes back together to now decide that I'm gonna take action. I was thinking about how I'm so nice and youthful. At this point, I'm only 15 years old, and I know I have a bright future ahead of me, but right now times are just a little tough. But I don't like wasting my time. That is something that I always value. I didn't know when the situation was gonna end, but I wanted to cherish every single bit of my youth. Our situation was not perfect, but by using what I already had in my small backpack gave me the option to at least try. And since we had the internet, I figured this would be the best way to start pursuing things that I love. My mom likes to say I have that A-type personality. I am extremely ambitious and self-motivated. I don't need anyone else to tell me to do something. I was really confident in myself, and in a way, I kind of didn't like when people told me that I couldn't do something. And not even to be snobby, but if I had the capacity and the capability of doing it, I felt like, why would I allow someone to break that confidence? Now, I'll just give you all a small example, but when I was in 6th grade, I was sitting in art class, and the boy next to me looks at my artwork, and he's like, yeah, you probably won't be able to finish that. And he wasn't being rude, technically, but in my mind, I was like, who do you think you are? Like, how are you gonna tell me that I can't finish this? And after he said that, I took that as a challenge, and I told him, watch, I am going to finish this project by the end of the class. Don't you worry, I'm gonna finish it. And sure enough, I ended up finishing the project by the end of the class, and the boy looked pretty stunned, but I was so serious because I felt like he almost challenged my capacity and my capability. Now, we all know that pride comes before a fall, and I was quite prideful because I had so much trust in myself, and I felt like I could do everything. I was my own boss, and I didn't allow anybody to dictate what I could and couldn't do. But now, thankfully, since I have matured spiritually, I have learned to keep that ambition and keep that drive, but do it for God. Since God is the boss, I am just the employee. I get to work for him and focus on what he wants me to do. Now that you understand my mindset, it's time to introduce one hobby at a time. One of my favorite hobbies is language learning, and up to this point I have made it clear that I have learned 3 languages. Let me explain. Chinese is my first love. If you were to ask me which language is my favorite language, I would say Chinese. 我学中文已经1年多了，我真的好好学习，因为我想说一口流利的中文。我的中文完美吗？没有，不过我继续努力，有一天我想去中国旅行。 I could give you a million tips, but what was the main thing that I used that has gotten me to this point? Everyone says consistency is key, which is true, but I think consistency should be paired up with intensity. When I said that I wanted to learn Chinese, I didn't want to study for 5 minutes a day and then go on my way. 5 minutes may be great when you're first starting out, but when it comes to reaching fluency, 5 minutes is just not gonna cut it. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, you have grammar, reading, writing, speaking. I mean, there's just no way you can do it all with only 5 minutes. So in summer of 2023, I told myself I am gonna study this language every single day and all day. Now this attitude is what led me to pick up the language so quickly. I firstly gave myself a time frame, so I was expecting myself to at least show up for 2 months straight, and then I planned out the summer of all the different tasks I wanted to complete, so I had a sense of direction. But as you can see, this is a ton of work, and I really do like the challenge, but sometimes I wish a platform just offered that right off the bat without me having to figure it all out. I need a platform that provides consistency and intensity. I was trying my best to make my own curriculum, but I would spend hours, if not days, looking up all the different resources, and I have to admit this, but sometimes I'd spend more time researching than studying. And truth be told, sometimes you just want to show up as the student instead of being the teacher and the student. When I started learning Chinese, I learned a lot about the other side of the world. I didn't realize this desire to learn about people and to learn about other countries would push me to learn more languages like Italian. Il cinese è più facile da imparare per me, quindi il mio italiano non è altrettanto buono. Ma spero di poterlo cambiare quest'anno con 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝓁. With the 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝓁 sprint coming up, I'm excited because I get to finally just be the student. For those who don't know what 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝓁 is an online language school that makes language learning easier for you. 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝓁 will keep you accountable because you are making a commitment to stay consistent with their intensive course called the 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝓁 sprint. With the 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝓁 sprint, you are committing to taking 1 hour of language class every other day for 60 days. The sprint challenge offers 30 lessons in in 60 days, and if you successfully complete that, you get the opportunity to get 50% cash back or 30 class credits. Now maybe you're like me and you want to make progress as fast as possible. Then you should take the Super Sprint. The Super Sprint offers 60 lessons in 60 days, which means you get 50% cash back or the opportunity to get 60 class credits if you go to class every single day. Having a set class with a maximum of 5 students per class and a teacher helps you build confidence. Human interactions are the most valuable asset you have when it comes to language learning. Sono americana? Speaking is usually people's biggest weaknesses, but you won't have a problem if you plan on learning English, business English, French, German, Spanish, or Italian because 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝒁 will take care of everything. The Sprint Challenge is already discounted by 10% and the Super Sprint is discounted by 20%. But with my exclusive code, 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝒁 is offering a special discount just for you. If we break this down, you have the opportunity to pay for live classes for only $4 per class after winning this challenge. So what are you waiting for? Don't sleep on those New Year's resolutions if you want to be bilingual but on a budget in 2025. Sign up today with my link to save up to 20% and get an additional $25 off with my code IzzyBizzy2025. Thank you so much 𝐸𝓂𝒂𝒁 for sponsoring this portion of the video, and let's get back to my story. I love challenging myself, and when I learned that Chinese is considered one of the hardest languages to learn, I was excited to learn one of the hardest languages in the world. I didn't have any Chinese native friends, nor did I have any idea on how I was going to actually learn this language because I only knew English. But what I did have was the internet, and of course, due to my situation, it made the most sense to try to learn this language for free. I watched a lot of videos on how to learn a language first though. So you have YouTubers like Steve Kaufman, Zoe Languages, Lindy Botez, Robin McPherson. These are people who can speak multiple languages, which makes them a polyglot. The information was great about how they acquired each language, but I needed resources for myself so I can utilize that information and apply it to my own study routine. Because I devoted a whole summer to just language learning, I was able to figure out what worked and what didn't work. I would spend hours memorizing new words and new phrases. I found a native on YouTube who offered pre-made sentences for the HSK1. The first week I spent was memorizing a lot of new words and a lot of new sentences with flashcards. I only wanted to spend 2 weeks learning the HSK1 vocabulary since there was 150 new words. So if I explain this to you all, the first week was me sitting down with my flashcards and I would study the sentences along with the new words. Since I wanted to get it done pretty quickly, I was able to learn 30 new words and sentences in 5 days. The following week, I really wanted to hone in on my writing skills. Writing is really important to me, so I spent the second week writing out all of the sentences and all of the words. So as you can see, this was my routine for the first 2 weeks of learning Chinese, and I was able to learn HSK1 pretty quickly, and I moved on to HSK2. But you guys, I was studying Chinese 24/7. I haven't even gotten into all the different podcasts I listened to or the content that I watched or the apps that I used to catapult me. I was doing the most that summer, and let's just say I didn't quite exactly move away from the hotel bed. When it comes to Chinese, I was just so invested in this language. I mean, it didn't matter if it was a holiday, if we were sitting on a curb, if we were in a hotel lobby. I was just so committed to learning this language. And I wanted to tell anybody to find their ultimate comfort in, of course, a language or a hobby as a Christian. But what I will say is I can look back and have so many great memories because I was so focused on just Chinese. And I think if you don't have something else to do, all you will end up doing is focusing on your situation. I see myself sitting on that bed and learning Chinese and falling in love with the language, and I recommend that you have other things that you can gravitate to so you're not so caught up in your current circumstances. And of course, my love for Chinese started to pour into other languages, so I started dabbling into Italian and Japanese, but I will say I had the privilege of being able to obtain some textbooks. I can already see people asking, how in the world was I able to attain textbooks if I was homeless? My long-term viewers already know what I'm gonna say, but the answer is Fetch. We use gift cards to pay for all these other things that we wanted to accomplish. And with Fetch, you are basically playing games to win free gift cards. I explain a lot of my saving money tips in the second episode of the Homeless series, so if you're interested, I'll put it right here so you can go check it out. But in that video, I go into detail about how we save money and what apps we use to make our life a little bit better by having a little bit of cash. I absolutely love talking about language learning. I can talk about it for hours, which is why I'm going to be making more videos on it. But let's move on to the next hobby. I have been taking art seriously since I was 10. I acquired a lot of supplies by the time I was 15. I mean, there was drawers devoted to just a bunch of supplies. I had my own workspace, but when we became homeless, we lost everything and all my supplies was pretty much gone. All I had was a sketchbook and some color pencils, but the core essentials of what I used was pretty much lost. I was still grateful for even having my sketchbook and my color pencils with me, but my essentials were all gone. I didn't have those items to make the same art, and I needed a solution where I could still find new ways to improve my art skills, but by finding things online. I needed something that wouldn't require a lot of fancy supplies, and 3D art fit into my standards. Now, don't get it twisted. 3D softwares can be pretty expensive. They're all really expensive, but thankfully there's this 3D software called Blender that is an open source platform and it is completely free. I'm so grateful to have platforms like Blender because if you listen to the CEO and the founder of Blender, he makes it very clear that making money is not something he's interested in.
But I was never interested in money. Money doesn't mean anything. It's not interesting. I call myself a maker. I want to make stuff. Whether that's software or 3D or designs or building teams or companies, or I want to make stuff. That's my passion. And the money is a means. And sometimes you need it to do something big. So you have to work, make money, and then you can do something with it. But the real satisfaction is in making something.
And I can admire someone for that because he could have really charged a hefty sum for the 3D softwares like any other big company. But he decided to make it free for everyone and essentially live off of donations so people could have the freedom to make art. And that has allowed me to pursue a dream of mine, which is to explore 3D animation and 3D modeling. So far, I have made so many different projects on Blender and I am really proud of all the progress I have made so far, but I used a lot of YouTube tutorials to help me get a little bit more situated since this was all new for me. Some 3D artists that I like to follow are Polygon Runway, Art by Tran, and Blender Guru. I like Polygon Runway because the tutorials are very simple and beginner friendly. However, I do like Art by Tran because their tutorials are so adorable and it fits right into my aesthetic. But on the other hand, Blender Guru really challenges me with his infamous donuts. It didn't matter where I was at, I was able to always have access to Blender, and I remember spending a lot of my time on Blender when we were at gas stations because it didn't require any internet. Next up on the list is animation. I will say art is probably one of the most expensive hobbies. You either have to find free platforms or you could find something at more of an affordable price. Like if I was to refer back to my 3D art, what if a person doesn't have Blender, for example, because they don't have a laptop, but in the end they have an iPad, and that iPad is still valuable because I know when I was doing research, you have a lot of tutorials on Nomad Sculpt. I have learned majority of my hobbies for free, but art is one of those hobbies that did require me to give up a little bit of my money. Even if that was using my saving tips that I have mentioned, I still had to use some payment method to get the information. But let me just say, it was worth every single penny. When it comes to animation, most people take the traditional route of going to some type of art school to learn animation. Obviously, in my case, I was not in a position to go to school, but I wanted to invest more of my time into animation. Animation is technically something that I have done in the past. has, because I used to animate my intros for my art channel all the time, which now looking back at it, it's not the best because I was mainly picking back off of my drawing skills. I was not an animator. I was a traditional slash digital artist. So it was a little iffy, but if you look at it, I did my best. However, I wanted to learn how to actually animate, and I needed a professional that was going to welcome me in with open arms without having to pay up so much money. And thankfully, Aaron Blaze fits into that perfectly. Aaron is an amazing animator who has worked for Disney. He was animating for Disney for 27 years and is known for being a part of a lot of those classic films. You know, that classic Disney style that we all adored as kids. And now he is making affordable classes. He has live streams on his YouTube channel. Seeing him animate on paper, oh my goodness, it's just so cool because you're seeing the drawings come to life. What I really admire about Aaron is his dedication to help people. He has a website called Creature Art Teacher and has so many courses devoted not only to animation, but just other art skills that he has picked up. Aaron has expressed that he believes that colleges are just so overpriced and no one has a real opportunity to learn art. And it's unfortunate that everything is so high these days, but now he is making a difference and you will see a lot of his courses on sale. He has courses that are only $1. Like, I have seen him have so many different sales where his courses are only $1. Once again, I'm just so grateful to have a person like that who's just willing to help the community, because you got to really think about it. He is a Disney animator. He could have charged $5,000 for those courses and people would have still bought into it because he's like a traditional Disney animator, and he decides to only make his courses at times only $1. Like, it's just such a blessing because I get to utilize those skills to now put into Christ-centered content. It just goes to show that not everyone is greedy. I think a lot of people don't want to pursue their dreams because they think it's going to be extremely expensive. But if you think about it, when I told you my story about learning Blender or learning animation, it was not overpriced whatsoever. I think once you do a lot of research, you will figure out what methods work for you and to work with what you have. For example, Aaron likes to animate on paper all the time, and he has this very particular Disney desk that he likes to use when he's animating on paper. However, I do not have a fancy setup like that, but what I did do was use Procreate, and I've been having this app on my device for a very long time. Procreate's pretty inexpensive as well, but the best thing about Procreate is it offers a animation feature. And so no, I didn't have that fancy desk setup, but I did have at least a alternative, and that still gave me the ability to follow Aaron's courses. Or let's just say Aaron's courses didn't exist at all. Maybe he was just doing live streams, because I would have just followed all of them as if they were tutorials, because if you think about it, he's showing you every little stroke that he's making, and I would have used that as a learning tool and kind of made my own curriculum. You see how a lack of money can make you more innovative in the end. I highly recommend finding unique ways through free platforms to pursue the things that you love. It's not always ideal to have to come up with all the information or have to figure out how you're going to learn things through free platforms, but it's so worth it in the end. Scriptwriting is not something I envisioned for myself whatsoever, but Aaron was offering it on his website because Aaron has a lot of other teachers that will teach you new things that maybe Aaron isn't teaching. As a young kid, I was always taught to take any opportunity, and this can be done in any setting. Like, I know when I was in school and they had free clubs, I would join because I wanted to know, even for myself, would I like this? And you don't know that until you try it. So I gave scriptwriting a go, and I fell in love with it, you guys. I loved how the teacher explained everything. I mean, he broke down very popular movies and told you exactly what is the mindset of a scriptwriter, and it made me fall more in love with writing because I was getting the inside scoop of how it all works. And it was really fascinating because I was able to learn about character development, story development, how you build up a scene. Since I am doing like animations on my art channel, I thought the script writing class could really help with that, and I will say it did make me more of a storyteller. This isn't one of my main hobbies, but nonetheless, I have required this hobby while I was living in a shelter. Sometimes you are not learning skills to become a master at it. I didn't become a master at writing, nor do I plan on becoming like a professional script writer, but I think it gave me more information about myself. Learning new skills is all about learning more about you. So don't be afraid to try new things, even if you decide in the end that you're not going to take it at a professional level. Busy bees, sometimes it's good to pick something new but familiar. So in my case, picking something new but familiar was painting. I have been painting for quite a while, and some of my favorite paint I have used is acrylic. Like I said, I only had my color pencils and a sketchbook, so at the time I did not have any acrylics with me, but we were going through this program, and this program was helping us with certain aspects of our lives, and since they were aware that we were homeschooled, they decided to gift us with a bunch of school supplies, and one of them was acrylic paint. I was using the acrylic paint at first and painted a few things with it, but I wanted to try something new. We did start off with some watercolors. We ended up realizing that the triplets had a bag full of watercolors, and so I thought maybe I should give it a go. And spoiler alert, let me just say I did not like it. For me, the watercolors were a little too foreign. I didn't know what to do with it. It had too much water in it, and I couldn't keep that opaqueness. It was just too watery, hence why it's called watercolors. You're supposed to water it down, but I was so used to bright, opaque paint. With acrylics, no matter what you do with it, it's always opaque. I wanted something that was different than acrylics, but I also wanted something that was still familiar so I could utilize my painting skills. And after doing a bit of research, I learned that gouache would be the perfect medium for me. I love acrylics and all, but there was a downside, and the downside to that is it dries way too fast. And sometimes I would have to add water to the paint to just keep it alive and well. But with gouache, I could have the best of both worlds. I could have a nice opaque color, but I could water it down if I wanted it to be more like watercolors. I didn't have to worry about the paint drying too quickly. It just all worked out. Gouache is still a new medium, so of course I did have to figure it all out, but it wasn't entirely from scratch. Sometimes people don't like learning new things because it's too unfamiliar, but I think if you pick something new and still comprehensible, you'll be able to have more success with the new hobbies that you decide to pick up. For example, if you like knitting, why not switch it up a bit and try crocheting? Or if you want to learn a new language, think about the languages you have already acquired so you can pick your new language accordingly. So if you already know German, it would be best to learn Dutch because German and Dutch are very similar, because it would be easier to get through. If you already love being in a kitchen and you adore cooking, might as well test out baking. When I switched from acrylics to gouache, a whole lot didn't really change. My painting techniques were still the same. I used the same paper, the same paint brushes. Everything was still overall the same. I just took what I already knew and applied it to that new medium. But please, don't pick up new things for the sake of doing it. Like, if you really gave it your all and you tried this new thing and you thought you were gonna like it, but in the end you just wanna go back to your original hobby, then do that. Remember, we still want to be passionate about things, but I don't think it's a bad idea to start taking into account the things you have already learned and pick something that is pretty similar to it. When New Year's comes, we can tend to think about learning new things, but what about some of those old hobbies you have ditched a long time ago? Maybe you ditched it because you completely forgot about it or you weren't ready for it, but let's go back in time a little bit so you can see if you want to revive some of these old hobbies. I started digital art in 2019. I used Procreate on my mom's iPad and I haven't left since. And I started seeing drastic improvement in 2020 because I had an art channel and I was drawing a lot. So you can see a huge difference by the end of 2020. In 2022, my art was still pretty good, but I felt a little stuck. And this can tend to happen because when you are decently good at something, it can be harder to see that progress. The main reason I didn't see a lot of progress, if I'm gonna be honest, we were hopping from hotel to hotel. And I know I might have been studying Chinese on the curb, but for some reason, it was a lot harder to maintain the digital art. It's like I kind of need to be locked in on just making digital art to see a massive improvement. If you all have been following my journey, then you would know by the end of 2022, I was finally able to stay with my grandmother. Now, she did end up evicting us, but at least we were able to be stationed for a good amount of time. The first week of drawing was pretty tough. I was intentionally making time for digital art again, and I didn't really see any growth. If anything, my art got worse. It was like it was going through this ugly phase. That can be the downside when it comes to reviving an old hobby, because you are looking at all the big improvements you've made in the past. But it was easier to make those improvements because there was so much to learn, versus you doing something now, you have to work 10 times harder to see it. I have been a self-taught artist for a long time, and the only way I learned art was through YouTube. Like, I would just watch a load of tutorials. YouTube is great, don't get me wrong, but I started to feel like I wasn't making a lot of improvements because I wasn't getting any new information, and I just felt a little stuck. I did some research, and Patreon came up a lot, and I realized that a lot of my favorite artists had Patreons. And the best thing about Patreon specifically is everyone usually makes it pretty affordable because they want you to truly be able to stick around every month. At first, I was so frustrated with not making any progress, but after I joined one of my favorite artists' Patreon, I learned a lot and I thoroughly enjoyed what they had to offer, and I was able to grow a lot. I would say it worked because in October, my artwork looked like this, and in December, it looked like this. There was so many hours put into reviving this art medium, but I am so happy because I feel so content with my digital art. Now it's your turn. Think about it for a minute. What skill have you picked up that desperately needs an upgrade? As an extrovert, you would think I'd spend majority of my time doing my hobbies with others, but that is far from the truth. I do things alone majority of the time because I am very independent and I like making progress on my own. However, recently I have been trying my best to get better at doing things in a group. I don't always have to do things alone, and it has been a little difficult at times because I am so used to just going ahead and doing things at my own pace. So sometimes I like to go ahead of the pack, but I will say doing it with my family has made things a little bit sweeter. Having hobbies set aside that I get to do with my family makes things a little bit more enjoyable. It's always encouraging to see my family and I starting at the same point because we can all encourage one another and we get to see all the progress that we have made. We can finally talk about the same things, and it's nice having someone who keeps you accountable. Accountability is very powerful because they constantly remind you of all the things that you want to accomplish. When it comes to clay art, it was really supposed to be a simple activity that we planned for Christmas. We didn't have anything laid out, you know, we weren't celebrating Christmas the same way, but we figured we could buy some cheap paint, some cheap clay, and celebrate that way. Since it was Christmas time and we were living with my grandmother, I wanted to make something special for her. Now, she wasn't the nicest person, but the Bible tells us to love your enemies nonetheless. So I wanted to make something for her. I wanted to gift her with a clay figurine that was based on her. I know that sounds pretty ambitious considering I have never worked with clay before, but I was willing to do it. This was going to be a big challenge because my grandmother at the time broke a few of her toes, so she was in a cast, and I figured maybe it would be best to make a figurine of her wearing that cast. I started using some air dry clay from Crayola, and all I used was my hands and a spoon to sculpt everything. And once I sculpted it, I used a nail filer to file down everything and get rid of some of those rough edges, and I painted it with acrylic paint and I was all done. I thought it was pretty cool considering I only did this once, and when I look back at it, I thought, oh my goodness, this was so much fun. At first I thought I was just making a simple Christmas gift, but I ended up loving the whole process. It was fun to finally step away from 2D art and get into 3D art because I could feel everything with my hands. And so when birthdays came around and we wanted to celebrate, we would use just some simple old air dry clay to build up some memories. Now that I am a full-time YouTuber, it sounds so crazy to say this, but I'm able to invest in an actual business, and I just could not shake this off, you guys. I just wanted to sculpt, and now you are looking at a future business owner because I'm gonna be sculpting things for my art business. And I'm not going to be the only one sculpting, but my family is also going to be there along the ride to just help out and also make a few clay pieces for you all to enjoy. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm glad that I did it with my family because clay kind of holds a special place in my heart, because when I think about it, I think about all the memories that I have built up with my family. You would think with 7 hobbies that I'd be fully booked with no time to spare, but not I, not I. I have wanted to learn how to crochet since I was a little kid, and at 9 years old, I watched my mom and my older sister crochet a blanket, and ever since then, I have been fascinated with the idea of crocheting. I thought crocheting would be a piece of cake since I was a fast learner. I could pick up things pretty quickly, and I never had any issues with learning things, but this one would humble me. It didn't matter what I did. I watched a lot of videos, my mom explained things to me, I tried to do it on my own. I could not learn how to crochet for the life of me. It was really bad. I mean, you guys, I couldn't even make a chain, which for those who don't crochet, a chain is literally the simplest thing you can make when you are crocheting. Mama didn't raise a quitter, but I had to sit this one out because it was the most irritating thing I think I have ever experienced. I decided to move away from crocheting, pick up knitting instead, but deep down, I wanted to know how to crochet. When I tried again in 2020, I thought it'd be a different experience because I was now 13, you know, I was 9 back then, and for whatever reason, I still couldn't pick it up. I think I learned how to do the chain, but I still couldn't move forward. So I just gave up. I was like, look, maybe I should just be happy with knitting and move on with my life. But it's interesting how when we became homeless, my younger siblings asked if they could crochet. The younger two, the girls specifically of the triplets, asked if they could learn how to crochet, and it wasn't a huge surprise since they were big crafters. I thought surely this was just going to be for them. But the more I thought about it, I thought about how maybe I could pick up crocheting as well. It's still something I really want to do. Let's see, like, let's give it just one more go. So we decided to buy a small cheap kit off of Amazon with Fetch. Like, we buy everything else. We literally buy everything with Fetch. But the smaller kit was a better option for us because it at least gave us the opportunity to experiment with the yarn, get used to hooks, and figure out if this is something we want to pursue in the future. We started learning how to crochet in the shelter, and I will tell you all now, I finally learned how to crochet. 9-year-old Izzy would be so proud right now because I could not do anything, and now I have made just a little bit of progress. I made quite a few cutesy things, and even just seeing that makes me so happy because it took a long time to get to this point. As you can see, some hobbies just take longer to learn, and I know in my first tip it's all about consistency and intensity. If you do those two things, you'll get the results. But I learned that that doesn't work for every single hobby. We all pick up things a little differently, and I think consistency and intensity helps, but it even gets to a certain point where you could really do everything and still kind of fail at it. So you have to give yourself a lot of grace, a lot of patience. It took me a long time to get to this point of now being able to crochet, but I will say it has been nice just taking my time. Still to this day, I take more of my time with crocheting. I have picked up a lot of hobbies, and sometimes some of these hobbies have turned more into jobs and are even more work. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's healthy to also have hobbies that you just kind of keep for yourself. A lot of times your hobbies can grow into other things, and that can be great for better opportunities, but then when it comes time to relax, I wouldn't have a relaxing hobby, as I like to call it. A relaxing hobby is really simple. It's a hobby that you use to only relax with. So with crocheting, I don't have a set time with it. I don't have like specific projects laid out. In comparison to some of my other hobbies, I would have everything laid out and I would have all these goals and I wanted to have everything perfected by the end of the year. But with crocheting, it's not really like that. Yes, I'm going to continue learning it in 2025, but I don't have this massive goal waiting for me at the end. And I encourage you all to do the same. Don't forget to keep some hobbies for yourself. It's good to just have something set aside where it's like, oh, this is the hobby that I just sit down with, I thoroughly enjoy, and I can just learn it whenever I feel like it without having anything tied to it. Majority of the time, we're learning new things because we're passionate about learning a whole new world, which is the best attitude to have because then everything flows so organically. But I still would encourage you all to think about the future when you are picking out your hobbies. You don't have to make everything centered around a future job, but I think it's still healthy to think about all the doors that God could potentially open up by picking up this new skill. I know, especially with being homeless, I knew that I wasn't going to be homeless forever. So I wanted to utilize that time to build up my resume so I could have a brighter future. Also, sometimes knowing how impactful your craft is will encourage you to stay in it. And I'll tell you a little bit of my own story. I started doing YouTube just as a 13-year-old kid, and I had no idea what being a YouTuber really entailed. You have to wear so many hats, and whether you're monetized on the platform or whether you're doing it for free, all the jobs are pretty much the same. You have to be the accountant, the thumbnail designer, the marketer, the editor. Like, there's so many things that you have to do as a YouTuber. As you can see, this hobby was opening up the door for other things that I could utilize in the future. I've been editing for so long that I can't even imagine giving up this hobby because so much dedication and money has gone into it. Some people have asked, like, how did I learn to edit? And it's very straightforward. I made a lot of videos, therefore I was able to make a lot of mistakes. There was definitely a stage of just experimenting and figuring out what I wanted to do and what did I want my editing style to look like. Since I have been living in this hotel, I have had a lot of time to just sit and edit, and I pretty much edit every week. I use Final Cut Pro to edit, but before I fully committed to this app, because this software is literally $300, I made sure to use their trial first, and their trial offers only 90 days, and I used it twice because Apple does have a feature set in place where you can pretty much download the trial as many times as you want. So every time they update their software, you get to download the trial once again. And so yes, I was using the trial multiple times to really learn how to edit, and I did it for free. I still was doing it on a budget, but I was able to figure out what I wanted, and there was a lot of trial and error. Now, if I want to become an editor, I pretty much have a portfolio already set in place just by doing YouTube. But you see how learning one skill can contribute so much to your future. I can decide if I want to offer classes in the future, I can edit other people's videos, and even let's say if I decide to just stick with my own YouTube channel, you can't deny that there's value in this skill. I highly recommend sitting down with yourself and thinking about all the different avenues that this skill can really take you. It doesn't mean you're going to move forward with all these different paths, but at least you're aware of the value that your craft hold. Once I realized how valuable these hobbies were, I decided that once I picked up a hobby, I wasn't going to drop it entirely, because I realized that someone could always benefit from it. I mean, think about it. I put all that time into Chinese, and to just one day say, oh, I'm not going to do it anymore, I think is personally hindering me, because not everyone can speak Chinese, and there's so many different doors that God could truly open up in my life. I remember asking my mom this question when I was younger, and because I was picking up so many hobbies, I was concerned that they would go to waste. And I asked my mom, what happens if I pick up too many skills? And this is what she responded with. She said, none of your talents go to waste when you give them to God, sweetheart. That has stayed with me to this day. I'm always aware that no matter how many skills or hobbies that I decide to pick up, God's gonna use them regardless. And it doesn't even mean it's always gonna end up in a 9-to-5 job. Sometimes Holy Spirit will just lead you to make handmade items so you can donate it. Or he will call you to teach one of your skills to a family member. Sometimes we have all these different skills and it's time to pass it on to the next generation. God is very strategic and has a plan for literally everything. So never think that your skill is a waste. Your skill will always result in some form of success because it has value in this world. Calligraphy is not something I do very often, and I think it's mainly because I really want one of those fancy calligraphy brushes so I can get a real taste of what calligraphy really has for me. But if you were to ask me why I picked up this hobby, well, it was to make my notes more aesthetically pleasing. When I started learning languages, I was doing more note-taking and I wanted my notes to look a little fancy. So I decided to experiment with calligraphy. We used YouTube to figure out some of the strokes and we followed a lot of tutorials once again to get an idea of how calligraphy really worked. Some people learn calligraphy so they can really make beautiful cards and they can put all their heart into like the piece of paper of just writing something, and I did not fit into that category whatsoever. If I'm gonna be honest, the only reason I learned it was just for languages. I don't really have a purpose with it beyond that, but I wanted to learn this hobby to facilitate another because it made me happy to see all of my notes so organized. And that could be the case for you. You may want to take another hobby just to facilitate one hobby that you truly love and care about. Another example is I don't really like cooking. Cooking is not my forte, but I have been more interested in cooking because if I'm going to pair it up with the languages once again, I have been interested in making Chinese cuisine or Italian cuisine, and I imagine myself reading an Italian cookbook or a Chinese cookbook. Like, to me that sounds so fascinating and I can really use my language skills, and that's what makes me excited to keep making progress with language learning. But on the other hand, I am also making progress with my cooking skills, and now I'm improving both. I'm improving my language skills and I'm improving my cooking, and that makes me happy. The last and final hobby that I have picked up is braiding hair. In the Black community, it's pretty common to have two different types of people. You either have one person who is pretty much a professional when it comes to hair. They can make any hairstyle and they don't really have problems doing other people's hair. Or you have people like me who were raised with no idea on how to braid hair whatsoever, and when life got hard, you throw it up in a poof or a bun. It's very natural for other people to do your hair even when you're of age because it can be very hard to manage these beautiful thick curls. At the age of 13, I was able to finally wash, condition, and blow dry my hair without any assistance. Now that was already a huge accomplishment for me because it was so hard to wash my hair because I had thick, long hair, and with my tiny hands, I needed my mother 24/7. But there was still one tiny thing missing. I didn't know how to style my own hair. I knew how to braid and do some twist on a Barbie doll, but I had no idea how to style it on myself. And even beyond styling it, you have to make very precise parts for everything to look neat. I don't know about you all, but I cannot see the back of my head. So it was so easy to just put my hair in a bun or put it in a ponytail, especially when it was straight. But I wanted to start exploring this idea of doing my hair without it being straight. Having straight hair was nice and all, but I don't wear my hair straight necessarily the whole year. I know especially back then, I would only wear my hair straight during the fall and winter time, and when summer and spring came around, I was back to being a natural girly, and my mom would do all the braids and all the twists. But you all have no idea how much time my mom puts into all of our hair, and I say our because my mom had 5 girls, and that's a lot of hair to do. That's a lot of hair. That's a lot on her. With my older sister being gone, she only has 4 girls now, but still, it's a lot on her to do everybody's hair. And I just started thinking of ways that I could take a load off of her. And the only way to make that change was to start learning how to do it myself. And I had that opportunity when we became homeless because we did not have a flat iron, we did not have a blow dryer, so I could not get out of it whatsoever. I was able to straighten my hair for the first time in June of 2024. So for over 2 years, I was forced to work with my natural hair. It was a little confusing at first, but I watched a lot of tutorials on how to cornrow your hair specifically. I wanted to cornrow because I felt like it would be a little bit easier since most of the time the hand motions, you're spending majority of your time going backwards. After a lot of practice on my siblings and on myself, I can finally do it. I'm able to cornrow my own hair. You all have seen me wear the 2 braids, but I can actually do 6 to 8 braids on myself just going straight back. Now one day I really want to elevate my braiding skills and make very intricate hairstyles on myself, but we will see how that goes. I want to end the video by saying all these different skills help create independence. You don't have to be concerned with having to depend on someone else. If I want to illustrate a children's books, for example, I don't have to hire an illustrator. I can just do it. Honestly, it's a really nice feeling when you have that option to do it instead of always having to pay someone else to do it. I'm not against, of course, outsourcing, but I know a lot of times when you have all these projects in mind, it's better if you get to do it because you can say like, oh, I've made this or I've done that. And I think that's really special. And then you can use those skills to offer to others. Well, we just did a lot. We did a lot in this video. I hope you all enjoyed this video. This was really special for me to make because I was able to talk about all the different hobbies, and I feel so fortunate to be able to say that I have learned all of these different skills. And I'm so young, and I more than likely am going to add even more skills, but I hope you were able to implement these habits now into your own journey because I really want you all to be able to pick up new hobbies as well. Maybe you can even comment down below some of the hobbies that you are pursuing in 2025. I am really curious to know what you all are doing and how you are moving forward. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!